Cool. Right, welcome back, everybody. So, I hope you've digested all of that, internalized it all. Yeah, all good? Yeah, I'll go home now. All right, yeah. Well, maybe after this. Yeah, right, so establishing spiritual and legal governance is what I've titled this. We're going to go for another hour or so. I'll try not to do a mic and run for sort of an hour and a half or anything. So, but here we go then. Right, I mentioned in the last session about creating a constitution. So this is something that is going to be absolutely fundamental to your success. If you want to be able to work with other people in relationship, draw people to you, have a team that are around you, you need to create that constitution. If you want to delegate to people, then you're going to have to get that sorted out. The best thing is you can use your blueprint to set the governance of your organization. But it does mean you need to understand your blueprint, right? The most important thing in your constitution is going to be the ethos of your organization. One of the most difficult things to protect is the ethos of your organization and your project. If you look at major charities, big charities that have been going for 100 years, let's take, I don't know, Oxfam. Where did that start? It started with a Christian heart as Oxford Famine Relief. It started with good Christian people setting up a project to deal with famine. Where has it ended up? Is it still a good Christian project with a Christian ethos? I'm not going to answer that. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusion. So if you want to create something that can maintain its ethos, you're going to have to look at how you make that a foundation within your constitution. What tends to happen is, over time, the people who set these things up retire, or worse, but they retire. And you have to hand it on to somebody. How do you ensure that what you've handed on continues to maintain the same heart that it was set up with? Your blueprint can help you do that. Your blueprint can help you set that ethos in the constitution in a way that will protect it for as long as it's possible to protect it going forwards. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can define the membership rules and rights of who is going to be part of your organization and how they're going to function within it. If you're setting up a trust, just because you need a group of people to run an ecclesia, you might not necessarily need that to be a legal entity other than we're just going to be all in agreement because it's a small group of people. But somehow you've still got to make sure that those people all operate in a fair, righteous way. So you're still going to have to set that up. And rules and the rights of memberships are a good way of enshrining that within your constitution. You need to also establish how decisions will be made. Who has authority? Is it going to be a committee? Is it going to be an individual? Or is it going to be all the members get a vote? That can be just as tricky, by the way. Yeah. Just look at political parties and what happens when they all vote. So how decisions will be made needs to be enshrined within the constitution. You can have a voting process, you can have a system of ballots, whatever it's going to be. But you do need to create that constitution. The other thing within that constitution needs to be your authority and your executive powers. What we have authority to do as an organization, what we're going to do in the world as a legal entity or as a trust or as an ecclesia, what do we believe we've got authority to do? And what are the members? What do the members have authority to do? And if there's an executive committee, how's that going to work? Given what you've learned about government, 3s, 7s, 10s, 12s, it's not necessarily a good thing just to have one person at the top telling people what to do and what not to do. Is that the model of government that Mike is now advocating? Is that the model of government that God is now releasing? No. 3s. You need 3s. Why do we need 3s? It is a reflection of heaven, absolutely. If it's good enough for God, it should be good enough for us, right? If he thinks Father, Son, Spirit is a good idea, we need to think that three is a good idea as well. And practically, it really helps to stop somebody dictating to everybody else. It helps to undo that top-down approach when you've got a three that are in agreement. And if you have to have agreement to make a decision, then it requires you to go through a process of relationship in order to reach a decision at times. Because sometimes two will agree, one will not, but you have to work it out until there's complete consensus. That really does change the way you work. And I would recommend that you enshrine that in your constitution. If you're going to be trading, or if you're going to be interacting with public bodies, or if you're going to be taking contracts or anything else, you need to look at what liabilities are you going to take as an organisation. You have to limit your liabilities, people. Who wants their house taken off them because the organisation did something bad? No. Who wants to end up in prison because you're responsible for people that you were working with? No. Okay, so limit your liabilities somehow. And you can do that through organisational structures, legal structures. Define clearly the mission and purpose. I talked earlier about mission creep. You avoid mission creep by saying, this is the thing that we're doing. Only the thing that we're doing. Now, the Charity Commission like you to have objects that say this is what this organisation was set up for and what it was set up to do. Within that, they also have to comply with being in the public interest. It's got to have true charitable purpose. That's just a charity. So you might have a company, decide you're going to trade as a company. That's fine. But what does the company do? Set your objects out, clearly define it. You also have to accept that over time, things change. People change. The people who are involved with your organisation will change. The environment you operate in will change. And in case you haven't noticed, sometimes God moves the boundaries. He changes the goalposts. And we have to respond to that. So sometimes you have to change your organisation. So somewhere within your constitution, you need to have rules about how that will be done. It doesn't need to be onerous, but it needs to be a process that everyone's agreed on. Like, if we think we need to change this, what do we do to make that happen? Not just, so-and-so thinks it's a great idea, so we're going to go and do it. So rules for changing your constitution. You have to also maintain the spiritual oversight. I'm assuming that everybody here wants to keep a heavenly connection with whatever they set up on the earth, right? So what is that spiritual oversight going to look like? Will you have benches? Will you have mountains? Will you have members? That needs to be understood within the makeup of your organisation. When you set your thing up, what's it going to look like from a spiritual viewpoint as well as from a legal viewpoint? Are you going to have trustees? Are you going to have directors? Will you employ staff and other employees? Will you have people that you've got to deal with in some way, shape or form? And if you do, how's the organisation going to be responsible for them? How are you going to interact with them? What role do they actually have? Simply, how does it work in practice? Well, let's look at then some organisational structures. What is the best organisational structure for your blueprint and your mandate? I can't answer that. It's whatever suits you. It is honestly whatever suits you. And you have to go and figure that out. There is no right or wrong in setting up an organisation or whichever structure you choose, except you must be aware of future-proofing the organisation you create. What do I mean by that? Well, many years ago, back when I had hair, and I joined this organisation, we had a church trust. We still have a church trust. It has a trust deed that governs what it is there to do, which is essentially a group of people coming together for the purposes of operating a church and teaching Christian principles and generally running a charity. But as a church trust, it doesn't have any legal weight other than to bind the people to work together. It is not a company, so it can't make contracts. It is a charity because it's got charitable purposes in the church, but it couldn't do some of the things we needed to do when we started to move into bigger projects. So, for example, if we wanted to take on a contract for looking after the homeless from the local authority, they need an organisation to write a contract with. It wasn't a legal entity. It wasn't something that could make contracts. So we couldn't do that if we only had that organisation. Okay. So as we grew and as we started looking at what things are going to come out of our blueprint and out of our mandates, we had to think, well, do we have the right structures in place? Now, to be fair, the Church Trust was set up in 1990 something, and it was only ever envisaged that it would be a church. But as things developed and as God put things in people's hearts and as people began to agree with them, we stepped into areas where he said it's not about looking inwards, it's about going outwards. And when you start going outwards, you start encountering the community and there's need, you start meeting those needs. He changed the heart and the way that this organisation runs. But what we had wasn't future-proof. So we've now had to put things in place that are future-proof and can go ad infinitum. We also had to understand our risks. You've got to do some due diligence. What are the likely things that could cause you a problem if you don't get them covered? Simple as that. But the scale of your vision should be matched by the strongest organisational framework that you can put in place. Do not be tempted to choose the easy option. The easy option is very often, well, I'll just keep doing it myself until I have to change. That is the point you will usually crash. Do the thinking. Look at it. If you believe that you have a real blueprint from God, is it going to be so tiny that it's just limited to you? It might be that that's what you're called to do. That's fine. But actually, if you're thinking that something is going to involve more people, going to impact your community, maybe have to work with other organizations, you've got to actually start from the beginning, at the beginning of thinking, how do I do that? What needs to be in place? There's lots of advice out there. Yeah. The other thing is you need to ensure the people that you work with and you join together with in your ecclesia or in your charity or in your organization are properly protected. It would be really wrong to recruit people to your blueprint who are excited about what you're doing and then lead them into a situation where you've put them under liability. That would not be great, would it? So you have to start from a position of, yes, people and their assets are going to be properly protected. And you can do that through certain organizational structures. That's fine. The next thing you need to understand is, what powers do you need when you're running your organization? Do you want to accept donations, for example? If you're going to set up a charity or a project, are you going to accept donations? If you are, you need to be able to do that. You need to have within your organizational constitution that you can do that. Are you going to need to employ people, staff or directors at some point? It might not be now, but do you envisage in the future that that will be part of your plan? Do you think your organization will have to own tangible assets like that in the future? Will it need a building? Will it need stuff that actually needs to be accounted for? If it does, then you need to work out how that's going to be built into your constitution. Will it need to borrow money, have a mortgage or a lease? We don't like borrowing money. Sometimes we take mortgages for big assets because we have to, but very often we can lease things. We've got a lease on 2 buildings. But to do that, we have to have the powers to do that within our organizational structures, yes? So, what powers do you need? Will you be trading? Will you be buying and selling services to people as part of your blueprint? Will you be producing goods? Will you need to contract with people? So I mentioned, we are on the 1st of October, I think Mike might have mentioned it to you, we are starting a 6-month project with the local authority, 7 days a week, from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning, looking after homeless people. We're going to be running a night shelter. Right? That is done under this contract with the local authority. Without the right organizational structure, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that because they have to have a framework that they understand in order to contract with it. And they also have to have the right bank accounts in the right names in order to transfer money so you can actually do it. Yeah. Will you be so flush with money that you will be the one giving the grants? will God's abundance flow through you and out from you. But still, you need to be able to give away money and say that's what your purpose is. Will you need to hold a bank account? Duh, yeah. Have you tried to set up a business bank account? How much information do they want? Who's heard of money laundering regulations? If you haven't, you will. How many ways do you have to prove you are who you are? Yeah. But this is all stuff that you need to consider. Okay. Well, there's a diversity of people in the room who've come from different places, so I'll try to cover some of the options that are available. So let's rattle through some of these. So in the UK, you can simply be a club or society, and that's great if you're a football team. It's great if you're running a kids' creche or something, but it might not be appropriate if you want to run a drop-in. You can be a trust, as mentioned. That might be fine if your vision is only ever to be what ours was originally, a church, an ecclesia for a group of people, for worship purposes, etc. You can now be something called a charitable incorporated organisation. You can be a charitable company limited by guarantee. You can just be a limited liability company. Which would suit you? Not-for-profit structures in the USA. We'll never guess, there are still non-profit corporations, very similar to what we operate in this country. There are trusts, but they're not always a separate legal entity. They're linked to the people that run them. There are unincorporated associations, the same as we have, and there are limited liability companies. Same question, what would suit you? What would suit you? I won't focus on those because I am not an expert in American corporate structures, but I will look at some of the things that are here. So club or society, ideal if you're a small group, or if you've only got a small project. Or if you're going to run something, say short-term, you could just set up a club or a society to run it. That's fine. It's very simple to set up. Essentially, all a bank would need is a constitution. So you still have to do one of those. Yes, and they will expect you to have a committee. No single person making decisions. You have to have a committee. They want to see devolved responsibility. But you do get personal liability. That's not good. It's fine if you're sure it's only like for a football club. It might not be great if you're going to run something a bit larger than that. So personal liability. It has no ability to make contracts because it has no legal person. It has no context in law. It can hold bank accounts, but they're held in personal names. So you've got to trust the person that's going to be your treasurer. And any contracts it has to do or wants to do have to be done by committee members. So for local football clubs, like youth football clubs, can have contracts with the local authority for certain things, but somebody has to be a designated member of the committee to do that. That might not be great for your vision, your blueprint. You can be a trust, which is a more formalized version of a club or society, where the members agree to act as a group and sign a legal document. It can be a charity because it's recognized by the Charity Commission. Again, has no ability to contract unless the individual trustees take that responsibility. It also cannot borrow any money. And again, the trustees have personal liability. So all the risk is on the committee members, the trustees themselves. Not my favorite thing. Charitable incorporated organization. This is a relatively new thing in this country, set up by the Charity Commission. It's not actually a company, but it kind of is. It's incorporated through the Charity Commission for simplified governance. So you only have to report to the Charity Commission. There is no link to Companies House. So you've taken one stream of government out if you're the CIO. And the charity number is issued immediately on setup because that's the way that they set them up. It has limited liability for trustees. It has an asset lock. What's an asset lock? Stuff that it owns, money that it accrues, have to be locked to the purposes for which the organization was set up. So if at some point you decide to fold it, you decide to close it down, or you have to close it down, that those resources, those assets, that money cannot be distributed to the members or to the directors. It has to be used only for the purpose for which that charitable or corporate organisation was set up. So you'd have to give it to another organisation with similar objects. So you can't take the money, folks. But it can contract and it can borrow because it's got a charity commission status. But it can't become a company. That might not be a problem. It's actually suitable for small to medium-sized organisations. Small to medium, in this instance, saying up 5 million turnover. Sounds small right now? You'd be surprised how quickly you get to 5 million. Charitable company. We use charitable companies. The project that we run Freedom Centre through Freedom Community Alliance is a charitable company. It has limited liability. It is registered at Companies House, and then afterwards is registered with the Charity Commission to get a charity number. So it's got 2 numbers. It is a legal entity. It can contract, borrow, and own assets. And the great thing is it's very well understood. It's been around for a long time, this structure. You talk to a local authority, you talk to any kind of supplier, they understand this. It's simple. There's no asset lock, though, unless we write it into our own constitution. It could cease to be a charity one day and just still continue to function as a company. So it has that distinction. Not that we want to do that, but it still has the distinction that if it was ever struck off the Charity Commission's register, which I sincerely hope it never would be, it would still be able to exist and trade its way out or do something else. It could still do that. It's based on a limited company by guarantee. And there are 2 different types of companies, guarantee and private limited. Do we know the difference? Okay. We'll come to that then. Right, it's a private limited company, but it has no shares. It is limited by a member's guarantee, which is written into the memorandum and articles. It can employ people, and it does. I think we've got 23 staff employed through it, plus about 70 volunteers that we look after as well. It can trade, it can contract, it can borrow, it has its own assets, it can distribute or reinvest profits. So it can give away money. But it cannot accept donations, just a limited company by guarantee, without the charity bit. It needs the charity bit to make it accept the donations. A private limited company has shares. We know what shares are, right? They are held by the members and they have a right to distribution of profit. Okay, you might be setting up an enterprise, a business, where you want to do that, but you need to look at whether that's appropriate or not. It's not appropriate for us. We're a charity. We're running social projects. We don't need to give money to shareholders. We want to keep everything reinvested back in the organisation, back in the charity, so we don't need that. Only your blueprint can help you decide what you're going to feel is the right structure for you. So, take a long-term view. Look at what your governance and authority needs to be, not right now, but to manage your blueprint when it's come to its fruition. Because when you start, like everything, you're going to start with a blueprint that is a baby blueprint. You'll have incubated it. When you give birth to it, it's going to be small. Hopefully, over time, as you're blessed, as people come, and as God gives you the resources you need, it's going to grow. So you need to set that governance and authority up. What will suit you? You'll have to decide. The activities, services, and contractual arrangements that you're going to be delivering will help you decide what's appropriate. As I said, we do commission contracts for like homelessness. So we need an organisation that can take those funds and also can be accountable for funds, but it can be limiting the liability for what we take on and can commission. So contracts are important to us. You know, we also have to work with other organisations. If you're looking at what your blueprint's going to require to reach its fullness, are you going to have to work with other organisations? Will you have to partner? Will you have to become part of a consortium? Will you just do everything in isolation? Our experience is you cannot just operate in isolation. To start with, when you're small, when you're doing Low-level projects, when you're birthing something, very often you'll start it on your own, and you may test it, you may run it, but as it grows, as it becomes successful, other people will notice. Yeah. When you start to have an impact in your community, other people will notice. That is the point that people will either try to stop you or they'll try to join you. You may decide that it's a good idea to work with other partners. It was mentioned that here, Freedom Centre is a community hub. So we run our projects through this building, but we also have the probation service based here. We have 2 local authorities housing teams based here. We have the local authorities rough sleeper outreach team based here. And we have representatives from drug service commissioners based here. We also have a representative from Citizens Advice Bureau comes in and does work. We have other agencies that come in to the drop-in and deliver their work because we allow them to come and do that. We are a partner-driven organisation. What does that do for us? Well, it increases the services we can give our beneficiaries. It increases massively our reach and the impact that we can have, but we only partner with those that fit our blueprint. But we have to be able to partner with them. Some of them pay us money to be here. I like that. Yeah. When we first started, they didn't want to work with us at all. I particularly love it when they come and say, we want to pay you so that we can access your service. That is a real reward for us. Look at your liability and risk. Look at managing your assets, including money. Money is always a tricky one, isn't it? How are you going to manage the money? Who's going to be responsible for the money? What systems are you going to put around accountability for money? Is it all down to you? Hope not. So, are you charitable, are you a social enterprise, or are you for profit? If you don't have a clue, that's okay. Be wise. Seek advice. But lay good foundations. One of the things that is a real obstacle that I've come across, and I talk to quite a lot of organisations who say, how have you ended up where you are? Why does Freedom Centre have all these contacts? We want to be like you. Can we come and talk to you? What I quite often have discovered is in people's passion and zeal for what they're trying to do, they really lose humility. Don't be too proud to ask. Don't be too proud to ask for help, either from contacts that you've made here or elsewhere. But if you really need advice, get advice. Don't be afraid to pay for advice, by the way. Okay. Collaborate. You may go fast alone, but you will go far together. Yeah. We collaborate a lot. We didn't because we were opposed. But as that has broken down, we've got more and more people wanting to work with us. I lose track of how many things I'm invited to go and be a representative on. Can you please be on this drug services group? Can you please be on this housing advice group? Can you please be on this, this, and this? Years ago, no one even picked up the phone. Now I get bombarded with requests for freedom to be part of things. Some of those things, they fit our blueprint and our strategy. I say yes, because when we collaborate, we find out more what's going on. It's better to be in it and influencing from the inside than opposing it from the outside. Collaborate. Except you must render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It's a fact of life, right? Yeah. You have to work with these things. HMRC, all those things. All right. Value and good advice and honor it financially. Free is not always good. There's a lot of good free resources out there, by the way, and I would say take them, use them. Go to the Charity Commission website. There's loads and loads of stuff on there. Sorry, this is UK stuff. Charity Commission website, loads of really good information. GDPR, who said of that one? Data protection, yeah. The Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. There's loads of information on there. The trouble is sometimes even what they think is simple is not. So sometimes you have to take it and say, what does it apply to me? If you really don't know, get some advice. There is also good free business advice out there. But when it gets to the point where you've gone past the value and the use of that free business advice, actually, sometimes you need to pay somebody to come and help. Do not be afraid to do that. One of the The greatest problems I've encountered with businesses is we want everything for free. Is that honouring?
No.
If somebody's got a skill set and they've worked hard to develop that and they've got experience and they really are valuable to you, should we demean them by saying, actually, I want you to do that for free? If God is a God of blessing and abundance, won't you provide for us to actually bless those people too? I think it's a cultural thing that needs addressing. Some people might be offended by that, but I really do. And one of the things we do here is we honour people and we pay people for advice and for help and services. Free is not always good. Sometimes it is, but free is not always good. What I would say is have an excellence mindset. Excellence mindset. Whenever God does something, does he do it in a bit of a rubbish way? No. Why do we think that we have to as well? Do not cut corners. When you're doing work, remember, everything that I'm talking about now might be really dull, but actually it's the foundation on which you're going to build something. If you put rubbish foundations in, your project is not going to support itself. Your project is not going to have any longevity. So you've got to actually treat this stuff seriously. So have an excellence mindset. If God was to do this, how would he approach it? Learn from the mistakes of others as well, by the way. Do not be afraid to look at what other people have done. I'm not saying, oh yeah, wow, I wouldn't do it like that. No judgment, but learn. If you've seen other people set up projects and it's gone crashing and burning, why did it crash and burn? Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel. Really don't bother. It'll waste of your time. If the thing you need is already in existence, use it. Adapt it. Change it by all means, but don't go out and try and invent your own thing just because you didn't invent this particular one. If it's already there, use it. Avoid the not invented here syndrome. Because we tend to, don't we? I don't need your system. I think I'll make my own because God's told me. Oh, I don't want to come up with my own accounts package. I'll buy something else, Sage or something. Why reinvent the wheel? I don't want to do it with spreadsheets. So, what will see you through all of that minefield of stuff? Know your mandate, know your authority, because those will translate into your constitution. Have a clear vision and mission so that you can use your blueprint to underpin all of those things that I've just gone through. Have clear governance, understand the roles and responsibilities. By the way, this stuff's homework. If you haven't already done this, you need to think about it. Have a collaborative attitude. Draw people to you. Share. Don't wrap your arms around it and say, no, that's mine. Yeah. Have a passion and a heart, a determination in the face of obstacles, because you're going to get them. Yeah. Remember Joshua? Be strong and courageous. Yeah, you're going to need it. Okay. Good organization, good management, good administration will solve so many of the challenges that come towards you. Now, isn't this in line with what we were talking about earlier on? Yeah. Manifesting, administering, supervising. You're going to have to do this stuff in heaven the right way. Do it on earth the right way. Christian passion, professional excellence. Doing everything to the highest standard. Do you like that one? Yeah. It's not mine. I wish it was. All right. That came to us, I'm trying to think how many years ago, through an association we had with Tier Fund. We were doing a project with Tier Fund. At the time, we were actually looking at how do we improve day centre services and all sorts of things. And it's a phrase that came out in one of the brainstorming sessions that we were having, one of the Blue Sky sessions. The guy wrote up, it's all about your Christian passion, but you need to do it with professional excellence. So we're like, wow, that sums it up, doesn't it? Yeah. Christian passion, your heart, your vision, your fire, absolutely, but professional excellence, because the thing that will stop people saying, yeah, that's a good organization, is if you do it really bad. No matter how excited you are, that will hold no water with them if you deliver things in a really bad, low quality way. So everything we approach here, that's our little mantra. Christian passion, professional excellence. If we cannot do it with excellence, why can't we do it with excellence? Sometimes it's our mindsets, right? Sometimes it's our thinking, But sometimes I can't be bothered. If you can't be bothered, don't do it. Yeah, because remember who we are. We're ambassadors of the king, right? We are kings and sons, right? Do kings and sons do things in a rubbish way? No, they really shouldn't. Okay. Done with that bit. So let's get back onto blueprints. I think you've had enough of the corporate talk. Well, you've seen our blueprint, right? You've seen the map that Mike drew. Not everybody's blueprint will look like that. That is just, if I'm frank, Mike's way of representing it on a bit of paper. If I was to take that and draw it from scratch, it would look a bit different because I don't see it quite the way he does. Although I see all the things that are in it and on it, I wouldn't do it quite the way he does it with all the, it's just too many colours for me now. It's all the blobs and things and lines and stuff. It's like, okay, you know, but for him that really works. And for lots of people that really, really works. But I look at it and go, my organised brain goes, actually, I'd change that and I'd move that around. You know, I've got a management background. I've got a consulting background. I look at stuff and I go, that needs simplifying. You know? But it's a great representation. I understand it, but it's not necessarily how I would draw it. So blueprints. A blueprint can be depicted basically any way you like. Is it a map? Is it a journey? It should be linking the activities and inputs of your ministry, your program, your intervention, your organization to the outputs and the intermediate and long-term outcomes experienced by members, service users, and other stakeholders. Did you get all of that? Did you get that? All right. So it's a picture. All right. It's got to have the journey through it. It should link your activities, your inputs. It should explain your ministry program or intervention or the organization. Show the outputs, intermediate and long-term outcomes experienced by your members, service users, and other stakeholders. There's a lot of stuff in there, right? Yeah. If you just took that and went, that's how I write my blueprint, it would take you a while. Blobs, yellow lines, stuff. Yeah. Essentially, it needs to illustrate the links between the activities you deliver and the changes you anticipate creating for beneficiaries. It will require you to explore something called assumptions. I assume you have assumptions. It's a process, right? But it needs to be a structured thinking process. So you need to turn your ideas and theories about what it is you're going to do into pathways that can be followed. Yeah. You are all going to be sat there thinking about your blueprints. You will, in theory, have an idea how you're going to deliver it. Even if you've not expressed that or worked it through, there will be subconsciously in your brain something that says, when we do that, we'll do it in this way. That's an assumption. You might not even be aware you've got one or multiple ones. Yeah. It's really important to get it all down on paper because that becomes a reference point. It's a product of your thinking. It's a product of working, and that can illustrate the results of your print process. Note process. Why process? Because you won't figure it all out in a day, quite honestly. And you can step into heaven and get the scroll, and you can eat that scroll. Yeah, and it becomes part of your spirit, it becomes part of you, but not always does it manifest in one go. You get it bit at a time. You get it piecemeal. You don't get it all in a big pow. It looks like this. So it's a process, and you need to draw that process out. And sometimes you need to test things in that process. So the most useful way of doing that is a written process. So you need to develop your written process So you've written blueprint through a process. Why bother with that? Because, I know what God wants me to do. Do I? Do I really? Well, your blueprint is going to be the basis on which you make decisions. Making good decisions and planning services requires you to understand the links between things that you plan to do and how you're going to create the changes. Now, I've put both intended and unintended. It's amazing that when you start to put things on paper and look at them, you will spot things about what you are planning to do that you wouldn't have spotted just having it in your imagination. Because you can step away from it, it becomes outside of you, and you can see the flaws in it. And there will be flaws in it, not because God put them there, but because your understanding did, because your filters did, because your brain processes did. So you've got to get those out. And from that, what you'll be able to do is create a clear strategy, because everybody needs one of those. If you're going to take it to fruition, you need to know how. It will test your assumptions about your work. Act as a check for what you do and don't do as an organization, keeping you on mission. Remember mission creep? Your blueprint will help prevent that. So when you're writing it, and writing it is really, really important. I'll keep coming back to writing it. It will help you to stay on mission. The other thing about a great blueprint is it gets people involved. You can pull in the different stakeholders, you can work together to shape and evaluate projects. You get the slides. Right? You need to get people involved. There will be people who share some of the heart and the passion for the same things as you. You want to get them on board working with you. They may be part of the same blueprint as you, and that'll be the challenge there to say, well, is this mine or is this something bigger? There's a guy called J. John, he says it's all God's donuts. It ain't yours, it's all God's. Don't get precious. It's all God's donuts. So you'll need to get people involved. A blueprint that you can explain to people is really helpful in doing that. If it's got lots of colours, lots of lines, lots of circles, you might need to explain it. Just saying. It's great for identifying opportunities, for collaboration, partnership working, developing new services, and ultimately releasing people to their destinies. Don't we want to be a blessing to people? When they get involved with our projects, don't we want them to feel excited, empowered, blessed, released? Yeah? Not burdened, overworked, under obligation. It provides clarity for your trustees, your staff, your users, other stakeholders, so everyone has a shared vision about what the organisation is seeking to achieve, how, and for who. It's really useful when people come to you and say, so what's your project all about? What is it you're trying to do? Hang on a sec. There you go. Building a name. Who knows the power of a brand? What's in a name? A brand that speaks of your values and the values of the beneficiaries. Yes, Jesus is our brand, but we are his ambassadors. So when you're putting your project together, just be aware that what you will be doing when you're sharing it is building a reputation. You will be building something that people recognize as you, as your project. They will put assumptions about you around how you've portrayed yourself. But your blueprint can really help you make sure you're giving the right messages to the right people in the right way, and that your colleague won't contradict them and say something totally different. Right? You can monitor what works, measuring stuff. Oh, do we really? Yeah, we do. Monitoring what works. Your blueprint can help you identify what you need to measure, because monitoring ensures that you know what difference you're making and also what changes you need to make. So that blueprint should also have something about, we're going to measure this, we're going to understand these are as our outcomes from the working. So you can have something that says, you know, actually I want to, I don't know, work with AIDS orphans in Africa. Well, what does success look like? Your outcomes will tell you what success looks like. We got them into school, we helped the parents, we did this, we did that. Those are our outcomes. And you can report that back to people that give you funds. You can report that back to people that you're working in partnership with. So your good blueprint will illustrate and explain everything about your project, but it must also be capable of communicating your vision. Simple, right? If you get a good visual representation of the project, yes, it is simple. But getting to that simple representation can be very, very challenging. Because you want to cover the spiritual stuff, but you also want to cover the earthly stuff. So within your blueprint, you need to think about those things. You need benchmarks for evaluation with measurable indicators of success for your activities, yes. But you need an agreement among your stakeholders about what defines success, and you need to understand what it takes to get there. So what inputs do you have to make? Should be part of your blueprint process. But it's a great tool to capture the complexity of your initiative in a single document that you can explain to people. Yeah. Cool. So, map, series of maps, aims, outcomes, activities, outputs that you believe will lead to your long-term aim should all come out of that. We're going to try and do some of that this afternoon. Are you prepared for that? Have you got some of those things already front of mind? Yes. So we'll see. If you haven't, you might need to take a look at your assumptions. What is the narrative that you're trying to demonstrate? How does it all link together? Some people are really good at just making a list and breaking things out. Some people need to flow more with a description, write a narrative, tell the story. Both are really helpful. The biggest thing that's going to be, well, fun for me, maybe challenging for you, is looking at assumptions. An assumption, what's assumption? Assumption is a statement that is presumed to be true without concrete evidence to support it. In the business world, assumptions are used in a variety of situations to enable companies to plan and make decisions in the face of uncertainty. So some assumptions can be very helpful, other assumptions not so helpful. You will have assumptions about your project. You will have assumptions about your blueprint. You will have assumptions about lots of things. So we need to clarify our assumptions when we do our blueprint. You'll have made a series of assumptions. Recognizing these assumptions helps you identify some of the critical factors affecting the success of your project. Some of your assumptions you won't even recognize you have. How do I know that's true? Well, when we're setting up projects, when we were looking at what we were doing here, we got management team together, we got people together to look at stuff, and you find people say, well, surely this, surely that's the situation, surely that's what's going to happen. Surely? Surely not. Where did your surely come from? Well, it's always been like that. Oh, are you aware that it's not true anymore? Well, when did it not become true? Well, since they pulled the funding for that, or since so-and-so started doing it, or since never. You know, but people have frameworks that they operate from, and those are what shape our assumptions. So recognizing your assumptions help you to identify some of your critical factors affecting the success of your project. Some of your assumptions will need to be made based on a bit of future gazing. They're the good ones, right? But they have to be based on some kind of sound knowledge, spiritually and physically. So assumptions that God says is going to happen, you can kind of take that to the bank, right? God says within your blueprint, within your mandate, this is what's going to happen when you do this project, right? Joshua, you're going to go and take the promised land, you're going to settle the promised land, I am going to be with you. His assumption was, God's going to be with me, it's all going to work out. Was that a fair assumption? Yes. Was it easy? No. Did he have other assumptions? Well, he obviously did, because at some point he forgot to ask God about what to do with the next battle. He just assumed it would be like the last one. How did that go for him? Not well. So we need to recognize where we've got some assumptions. Assumptions also help shape how you deliver your services. Good assumptions, like there's still going to be a government, there's going to be funding, that you're still going to be involved, that certain people could be relied upon. Those are kind of assumptions you can expect, all right? But you can track all those things. There are different categories of assumptions. I'll flag for you right now. These are ones that tend to be common. People. We will make assumptions about people, whether they're people we're working with, whether they're people that are our beneficiaries, people who are our partners, even our family. We will make assumptions about people and how they will interact and support or not the project that we're going to be taking on. Yeah? Who's found that one out? I thought you would do that. I thought you were with me. Did you? Operational delivery. It'll work like this, won't it? If we do this, it'll work like this, won't it? It'll happen this way because I think it will. I have so come across that. Like, well, where did you get that from? Jurisdiction. Oh, God said I can do it, so I'm just going to go and do it. Does heavenly always translate to earthly? Nope. Look at the relational ones. Okay, so some of the issues around relational people stuff. How do different areas of authority work together? So let's take the spiritual structure, the spiritual governance, your mountains, your benches, and your staff. Hang on a minute. Mountains and benches, they're the spiritual government, right? Staff are necessarily part of your spiritual government. No, but they're the ones who are actually on the ground working out the project. So for example, here I've got day centre staff workers. Yeah, I've got housing support workers who are working to deliver the blueprint to the beneficiaries we have of this organisation. Are they part of the mountains and are they part of the benches? Some of them, but not all of them. But how does that all have to work together? Well, it has to work together. We have to maintain the spiritual authority of the project. But what about people that we've got that we employ who are not part of the church and aren't even Christians? I can't make assumptions about how they will respond to our spiritual way of approaching things. But I do have to take into account people who are on mountains of authority or who are on benches, who have spiritual authority, working in relation to the staff that we have or working in relation to the delivery of the organisation. Tricky. Do you assume everyone will have the same level of commitment and passion as you? I think this is amazing. I get really fired up. I can talk forever about how exciting our projects are. I can talk for an hour on governance, look. Do I think everybody else has the same excitement about that stuff as me? No. But I have met people who have a passion for something and they think that everybody else should have a passion for it too. Bless them. Yeah, because that passion will drive them forward. But the hard thing is they will come across opposition, and if they can't deal with the opposition, that's a problem. But you can never look at any one of the colleagues or any of the people you're working with and just assume that they will have the same level of passion and commitment as you do, because they've all got different things going on, haven't they? Different spiritual experience, different home life, different work life, different problems, health, whatever it is. You know, you might have got a sick cat or something they've got to deal with today, so they're not going to turn up. There's always something, so you can't assume. Have you made assumptions about who will take what roles and responsibilities? I mentioned earlier on about obligation and expectation. That is one of the biggest curses in the church. Because we have Christian people that we're working with and we're talking to, we just assume that, well, he's an accountant, he'll be the treasurer. Will he? Did you ask him? Has he got other things to do? You can't assume that stuff. You also can't assume that, oh yeah, Nigel likes doing all these projects and things. He'll run that. Got a bit on the plate, don't want to. So have you made assumptions about that? So people you're thinking about or you are already working with, what do you assume about your beneficiaries' behaviour? We're going to do this thing. we're going to feed the homeless. We're going to have a night shelter. We're going to get people in here. We're going to give them showers. We're going to give them food. We're going to let them sleep at night, give them breakfast in the morning. Do I think they are all going to comply? Do I believe they're going to be really grateful? Honestly, no. Do you think they should be really grateful? Will they all be? No, they won't, because they're broken, they're damaged, they have problems. Some of them will be a right nuisance. Does that mean I can't extend our love to them? No, absolutely. But I cannot expect and assume that their behavior is going to be what I require it to be. I can't. I'll encourage it. I'll try to facilitate it. I'll have grace for it, but I can't assume it. Actually, the only thing I can assume is it ain't going to be what I think it's going to be from day to day. Yeah. This is a good one. Just because people use the same words, do not assume everyone means the same thing. Who's come across that? Because it's like, we use jargon, don't we? We use ways of expressions to explain things. And sometimes you will find that people will use an expression in a slightly different way to you in relation to a project or in relation to a service or something else. You know, earlier on we were talking about blueprints and mandates, and we're talking about, you know, manifesting. Now, what manifesting means to me, I've explained. But I could probably have asked one of you to explain what you think manifesting means. You wouldn't have said the same thing, would you? No? So similarly, when you're working with people in relationship and you're making assumptions, just because somebody says the same words as you does not mean that they mean the same thing as you. Yeah, and that is really difficult. That's why you have to be really clear. Really clear. Okay, operational delivery. So you've got to have assumptions about the links between your activities and the outcomes that they're expected to produce. Under or overestimating skills, resources, and the time needed. Oh boy, do we do that all the time. It'll be all right, we'll do that in a day. Mentioning no names, Mike. I can get this much done in this many sessions. He doesn't. He does try, but he doesn't. Yeah, but he has this expectation that he will. So, you know, that's a time needed thing. Sometimes he changes time, so he actually he can manifest that and make things happen there, which is great, but not always. He certainly didn't yesterday, because I know there's some sessions he missed, right? Yes, proof. Yeah, proof. Yeah, overestimating, underestimating how long it'll take. But we all do that. Yeah. What have you assumed about the context or environmental factors that may influence whether outcomes are achieved? Now, this is particularly important if you're working with other organisations. If you're particularly working with anything that comes from government. You would think getting a contract or working with some government or organisation would be a fairly stable thing, right? Nah, no. Goalposts move all the time. So you can base your whole project on the fact that you're thinking you're going to get some commission funding, right? The next thing that happens is they change the minister in charge of the department, and it goes. And you spent all that time assuming that your project was going to be funded by some government department. What do you do? We've had that happen here. We used to get funding for training people in the kitchen, getting catering qualifications, level 1, level 2s. We had tutors and trainers in, we had people signed up, and then literally 1 week we came in and the representative from the funder came in and said, really sorry, but the funding's pulled. When? Now. What do you mean now? You have to send everyone home. We had built a project around that. We had employed staff around that, and they literally cancelled it on the Friday, came and told us on the Monday. So you cannot make assumptions about certain things in your environment. Context of your project also needs to be understood. You might think that you fit into this certain area of belief or certain area of activity, but the world might see you completely different. So you need to look at, where do we fit in the grand scheme of things? All right. Okay, unforeseen issues. You're going to get some. No matter how clever you are, no matter what your assumptions are, you're going to get some. Legal, political, economic, social opposition, all sorts of stuff. You're going to get all sorts of things. You know, 1 minute it's Brexit, next minute it's not. So, all right, jurisdiction. This is another area of assumption that we need to be really, really careful of. Don't worry, I'm nearly finished. Heavenly jurisdiction doesn't always match earthly jurisdiction. It really doesn't. The problem with earthly jurisdiction is you have things that are already set up. So God may give you a blueprint, he may give you a mandate for a territory, for a people group, for a project, for whatever else, but I guarantee that when you start to outwork it, you'll find there are already things in that space. There are already things happening, and if there aren't, there'll be reasons for it, but I can guarantee you that there will be already things occupying that space. One of the examples for here is we have mountains of authority, we have benches that look after the mountains of authority, and when we were first trying to work out how does this heavenly and earthly thing outwork, we had people on mountains of authority trying to legislate into what happened here in the day centre. Right? An area that they didn't have actual earthly authority over. They weren't a trustee, they weren't a manager, but they were involved through the church, and one of them was an employee. So they felt they had jurisdiction. So they wanted to do things to change the atmosphere and change the environment and improve things here. But their heavenly jurisdiction to bring whatever their mountain was, and I won't go into it, didn't match their earthly jurisdiction in terms of the legal right, the management administration right to run the project. So actually it just caused problems. What they tried to do, bless them, they tried to make it so that the project would reach more people, that we would have a wider impact in the community, and that we would draw vulnerable people to us. And they stepped into the heavens and they sent out a sound and they assigned angels. And the next 3 days were the most manic, mad, crazy days we've ever had in the day centre, because they operated well outside of their jurisdiction and caused a nightmare for the staff that work here. Their heavenly authority didn't match their earthly one. It was a good lesson, because we went back and said, well, okay, let's do this in partnership so that both match. You don't just go and do the thing. Yeah. So be sure you understand your boundaries as well. And beware of earthly structures that already have authority. Now, those things that already have authority are likely to be governmental. Government departments, local authorities, councils, whatever they are, there are going to be organisations in place. You're also going to come across churches that think they've got a mandate or authority over an area, and don't you dare come into our territory. People can be very territorial. Yeah. Earthly structures can be worked with, but you have to make sure you've got the specific authority to change that situation. You may need to do court cases. Don't assume you can just pile in and make them move or make them change. You can't. So, a note about using legislation. You need to get the right laws to create the conditions for your mandate to manifest. And Mike, did he take you in to actually make a law? I didn't watch all of it. Did you actually step into heaven and actually make some laws? Did he talk about the process of making laws? He did. Cool. Excellent. So you're experts then. Good. You need to use the right laws to create the conditions for your mandate to manifest. Yeah. You need to use laws to create order, administration, and actually peace. Yeah, you can set boundary stones, you can set the laws in place that will actually make your project go a lot better. But order and administration are very important when you're trying to establish something. So use laws to do that. Do not try to usurp or force. If there's something that's already got an authority there, God will give you a strategy for removing it. Don't try to force it out, because that's not the way. Mike talked about spiritual warfare, right, versus heavenly government. Yeah. Yes? You know, we've got to go get the heavenly strategy. Don't just try and say, I'm going to write a law that allows me to evict this thing. No. Right. This one is born of bitter experience. Beware the law of unintended consequences. There's been many occasions where we have stepped into heaven, seen the mandate, looked at what God wants to do, and a very excited member of our team has gone, yes, here's a law, we're going to do this, and I'm going to decree it, and I'm going to step out, and I'm going to do, assign angels and make all these declarations, and then, whoops, didn't think you would do that. Something happens on the earth that you didn't foresee. The law of unintended consequences can be mitigated against if you act in a group setting, if you actually talk things through, if you operate as a bench. It's most time it occurs when you act in isolation. All right. Remember, if it isn't established in heaven, it won't be established on the earth. So go get your mandates first. You are aiming to create a shadow of a heavenly blueprint on the earth. And your mandates, again, will determine your success. Right. Mandates. By now, you should have understood the importance of mandates to go with your blueprints. Yeah? We understand that the blueprint is the big picture. The mandate gives us the authority to do it, right? The specific action. We have had people trying to step in and do things where they do not have mandates, where they've not set the laws in place, where they've not operated governmentally, and simply, if you don't have one, get one or get out. Right. Mandates are really, really important. So we're moving from legislation to mandates now, okay? Mandates give you access to the resources of heaven. They also produce favor on the earth. If God's going to give you a way to do something and the authority to do it, he's also going to give you the favor to deliver it. So your mandate helps produce the situational circumstances to make it happen. So mandates are really, really important. And this is the one that you've got to get on board with as well. If you accept it, you are responsible for it. If you don't think you can do it, you can talk to God about that. I've talked to God about that when he's asked me to do things. Mike's talked to God about that. Mike's argued with God about that. But once you get to that point of saying yes, no longer can you just go, God will you. It now is, I will do, because you've become responsible for it. Okay? Right. I am thinking that was a pretty heavy session. So we've gone through a lot there. We've gone through structures, we've gone through legal stuff, we've gone through assumptions, we've gone through mandates, and lots of things. I think we'll take a break. Yes, you can ask a question.
On a practical basis, how do you divide your time and effort between heavenly and earthly in your role?
In my role, how do I divide my time between heavenly and earthly? I try not to divide it. I try to operate from dual realms. Am I really good at that, like Mike is? No. But that is the way that I need to function. I find when I lose touch with my heavenly authority, work gets really hard. If I maintain my position of authority in the heavens, I'm sitting on my throne, I'm overlooking all the amazing sights that God shows me, and I'm sat there with my orb and scepter and all the things that are around me, and I'm governing from that place. My daily life was much better. Do I maintain that all of the time? No, that's just because I'm human and I forget. Do I do that as much as I am able to? Yes. So I don't separate the two. I try not to separate the two. There are occasions when I specifically step into heaven about things, particularly when we've got really big challenges, if we've got funding challenges or people issues, or we've got major obstacles and obstructions, if we've got opposition, then I will take those things specifically into heaven, and I will take time out of my day to do that. I will spend time with God in the office. Don't come in, I'm actually just dealing with something, or better still, actually I leave the office and go somewhere quiet where nobody can find me, and then I can do it, because my office is a bit of a madhouse. People come in all the time. So it's largely trying to operate from dual realms, trying to maintain that connection. But when there are specific things that are a real problem for me, then I will take time out. But I'll take time out of my work day to do that, because it's essential that I can function. Yeah.
And are you full-time?
Am I full-time here? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, when you said that the that what that lady did in the spirit.
Yeah.
Created a few manic days. What exactly happened? How did that manifest?
How did it manifest when she created a few manic days for us? Okay. What had been attempted was to reach people that we weren't reaching, to reach the most broken, the most vulnerable, the ones who really needed God's touch and God's help and our help. What we got was the most complex, the most disruptive, the most abusive, most challenging individuals from probably a 20-mile radius.
Just appeared.
Turned up.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of them we'd known about for a long time. Some of them were actually excluded from working with a lot of agencies. Some of them wouldn't normally step in the building because they know we're Christians, but they still came. So we ended up with a whole mass of people, and the day centre staff were like, we've never known any occasion like it. We've never known time like it. It was bonkers. And the place was crammed with people. So it's like, you need to start. What was the outcome? The outcome was, okay, we need to put some boundary stones in place. So we need to defend our walls properly. We need to assign angels to filter out the ones who are just coming because the enemy sent them to cause a problem. Yeah. Because you call people, you send a sound out, he hears it too. Yeah. So not only do you get what you want, you very often get what he sends as well. And he sent us the most challenging people that he could find. Yeah. And after we put all of those things right in the spirit, they didn't come again. They went elsewhere. Yeah. And it's not they wouldn't have been welcome individually, but when you get the horde coming through the door, and it causes massive disruption and it causes harm to other people who are service users. And there are some people who are a bit timid and a bit vulnerable. They didn't want that going on in here. You know, we try not to throw people out, but it got to the point it's like, you need to leave. Yeah. And we really try to avoid that. So that was the consequence of someone acting beyond their jurisdiction and actually beyond their understanding. Great heart, but unintended consequences. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Leave it there. Thank you, people.